Bird, 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 bird. Get him, get him, get him, get him, get him. Yeah! Ron Babe was right. Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. Hey everybody, it's Ron Bain with the Hunting Dog Podcast. This is a midweek action alert episode. A friend of mine I met a couple years ago, Jess Johnson, out with the Wyoming Wildlife. You can't say that three times fast. Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I got to meet her a couple years ago at an event, and she's the government affairs director. And there's a bill before. I'm going to botch this up, Jess. Why don't you just take it from there for everybody so they don't go, all right, turn the podcast off. Give us the action alert. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for putting this out. And there is a bill before the Wyoming State Legislature that is looking at legalizing the ability for sage grouse farms to exist in perpetuity in this state. And I'll go into a little bit longer of an explanation, but there's a litany of sort of conservation concerns and science concerns that are attached to this bill. And it's sailing through the Senate right now. So we're starting to reach out and really ask for some help. I think this bill has an ability to negatively impact sage grouse conservation well into the future. And so I figured I'd call up Ronnie and see if he could get some bird hunters on this.
Yeah, well, you called me up last night about 10 o'clock or 9:30 or so, and I would have normally just been in a house going in to watch an episode of Lucifer with my wife. It's about one a night, and I saw you call. I'm like, oh, I better grab that. I mean, why would you be calling me? And you're like, oh, is there any way we could do this? I said, yeah. I mean, that's what sometimes that's what a podcast is for, is getting the word out. And I know a lot of my listeners either have been, are planning to, or want to go to Wyoming to someday see if they can, like I did, to hunt that sage grouse. But give a little background. So this was already existing, right? There was something in place.
So in 2017, there was a bill introduced that was to introduce sage grouse farming in an experimental phase. And it had a 5-year sort of set on it. So it's called a sunset on the bill. So it said this bill is legal for a 5-year span. And at the end of 5 years, it will no longer be legal. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of an ability to say, like, you have 5 years to figure out if this works or not. And if it doesn't work, like, it needs to go away. Mm-hmm. And this bill came in late in that session in 2017 and surprised the conservation community and the science community. And it kind of just went through with votes, but it wasn't signed by the current governor at the time, who has done a lot of work. In fact, 3 administrations worth of Wyoming governors have done a ton of work on sage grouse conservation. And this particular governor didn't sign the bill into law. So it passed into law without the sort of rubber stamp of the governor. And he cited very grievous concerns around the same thing that we're concerned about. And so we're at the 5-year benchmark. And so we see this bill come in earlier in this session. We're in the second week currently, and it's erasing the sunset. So it's saying that this sage grouse farming can exist in perpetuity. It's allowing for the licensing of an unnamed amount of farms. It is also allowing each of whatever future farm or licensed farm, they can go out and collect 250 wild eggs out of the wild population annually to then rear in captivity. And the concern here is, like, the first one that pops up is that this is pulling annually eggs that are a public resource. Wildlife is not a private resource. It is a public resource, and is putting it in private hands to then captively raise and rear. And then this bill also allows for the sale of and then there's a whole other list of stipulations that go along with that. And it's a concerning precedent to set. And boy, in this 1970s, Wyoming fought really hard to keep deer and elk farming illegal in the state as well. And so we have this precedent that we don't use game farms for native species here. And it's for a litany of reasons: disease concerns, disturbance concerns, but a mega part of this is that privatization of a public resource for a private profit.
Right. So historically, when this bill passed, I think you told me before we hit record, there was one facility that was going to do it. When the bill was passed, it wasn't a free for all, so to speak. It was like, let's give this a whirl. Was it one facility? Whose facility did this, or do we know?
We do know. And when it originally kind of came up, it was, it was the same as it was, where it was like an unnumbered amount of facilities could try and get it. The Game and Fish did put in really, really strict criteria to get a license, and only one farm matched that criteria. Okay. So I think there were other applicants, but only one farm managed to do it in that short time period that they had. And it's a farm, I think it's out of Powell, Wyoming. It's called like Diamond Wing Sage Grouse Recovery or something like that. And it sort of got their ducks in a row. And that didn't happen until I think even 2019. And then they struggled to find wild eggs. They first used pointing dogs to try and find it, didn't find any there because the hens have no scent apparently during that time. And then they used, I think it was night drone flights and GPS collars on sage grouse for them to finally get to the point where they could find nesting and nests. And they, I think finally in 2021, they collected 134 eggs, 110 hatched, and only 51 are alive today. And I mean, that's, not a great hatch rate to start with. But we don't even know if they can reproduce in captivity, because historically that has been incredibly hard to get. There's one facility has ever achieved it, and it's a massive facility that is tied with the Calgary Zoo and a bunch of universities and research up there. And it's a very different facility. So the facility here in Wyoming that made this has sort of what they call flight pens. So it's like the dirt ground and a pen. It's not a place where birds... Yeah,
much like we see with pheasant rearing and quail, or Hungarian partridge, things like that. So it's not a place where these sage grouse can even learn how to be a grouse in the wild. They have no ability for the hens to teach the chicks, about predators or about landscape or about habitat. And so it's a very different facility to start with. And Calgary, when they went to release, I think they released 66 birds. 2 of those 66 survived and only 1 managed a nest. And that's from the research facility that's like professional biologists, zoo inspected, real professionals. I mean, that were trying to do it. And they had a success rate of one. A success rate of 1. Yeah. Okay, well, that's not encouraging for this bill, for sure.
And then you add, one thing I will say is this farm here in Powell, they are staffed by biologists. It's not that they're just
winging
this out there, but it's just setting an odd precedent. And this kind of gets the nuance of our concern of this, is that pen-raised game birds have never really been a viable option for legit conservation and population boosting. At best, we put it out there for hunter opportunity, for the put and take style of hunting, but they just don't last. There was a study out of, I think it was Idaho, that said 4 to 8%, pheasants have a 4 to 8% survival rate. And that is a pheasant. Right. Anybody that's been around sage grouse, I think we can all say they're maybe a little duller than the pheasant.
Well, right off the bat, I'm thinking, and this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, Jess, but we know that any chick needs insects when it's young to become a healthy, viable, build bone, build calcium, and then eventually, grasshoppers, and then because the sage grouse doesn't have a gizzard, so it doesn't work on grains like you could do that to a pheasant. You could go buy a pheasant at a farmer's market probably and keep it in the yard if you wanted to, because it'll eat that. But now a sage grouse is so obligate to the habitat that they have to have that to be a sage grouse. It's I'm already thinking it's probably not silly, but I'm like, what are they feeding them? I mean, are they going out and pulling sage leaves off and feeding them? I mean, it already sounds kind of icky. You know, I mean, I just wonder how that thought process works. Now, you mentioned that facility up in Canada where they actually have sage, where, in a huge area.
I think they have 160 acres, and it's like an enclosure that has habitat for nesting purposes. So these birds can actually, exist on a landscape like they're going to when they're turned out in the wild.
Right.
Whereas I think what we're seeing with this Powell farm right now doesn't have that. So it's not teaching these birds future survival tactics.
Well, there's the lek factor too with prairie grouse, right? I mean, what are they going to give them dance lessons? I mean, what are they thinking? Like, no, you get out there and show the young males how to dance. I mean, I know I don't want to make light of. It just seems like such a bad idea. I mean, just in a short conversation, this sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, and the thing that's concerning is it's being touted as this conservation fix, or this, like, why wouldn't we try this and try everything in the book to help sage grouse? That's what the opposition right now is saying, is like, well, why wouldn't we just try this if, like, it might work, and why wouldn't we put the resources there? And I think the concern here is, and it goes back to, like, what are the downfalls of farming? And it's disease spreading. It's a continual take off the landscape. So it's not like it's just they take one batch of eggs and raise them. It's that they'll keep taking eggs,
right?
As this experiment keeps happening. And you have the disease factor. I mean, you look at chronic wasting disease in Wisconsin. Theory is that it was brought in there by deer from a deer farm in Wyoming. So it's like, we talk about, like, what we do when we artificially put too many birds on a landscape to try and do it in a captive situation. We just introduce it. And then the final point with this that's really concerning is that sage grouse don't have a population problem. They have a habitat problem.
Right.
So the problem with sage grouse is habitat degradation, fragmentation, and just habitat health altogether. And just dumping more birds on a landscape that already can't support the ones that it has isn't going to help the species in any way, shape, or form. And it's pulling the focus from what many states and a multitude of stakeholders. I mean, there was industry at the table, there was agriculture at the table, there was wildlife at the table, conservation values. Everybody was at this table when they were figuring out this sage grouse plan. And, people gave up a lot. There was a lot of compromise. And so I think folks were, it's one of those things where everybody was unhappy. So you probably found a good medium.
Yeah. And there was a big, I remember when we did an episode with Steve on Mediator, we went to Governor Meade's house, and he was talking about how the ranchers are willing to work, the state agencies are willing to work. Everybody was like, yeah, it might hurt a little bit, but this is good. This is a good thing to do. And with all birds, I mean, wild birds, it is always habitat. It's always habitat. I mean, that's not even up for debate anymore, right? It's just not. And it's hard to believe that, somebody thinks this is a good idea, but it's just not a good idea. I mean, it's at least at least to the layman, I'm sitting here thinking that does not sound like a good idea.
Well, every scientist we've talked to, including one of the leading sage grouse scientists in Wyoming for the last 25 years, he's retired now, but Tom Christensen wrote a really great op-ed recently. He's saying, no, this is a bad idea. So, like, the leading voices in the science around this bird is saying, don't do this. This isn't helpful. Everybody that's been at the table that has worked on the habitat agreements that have been hard won in this state are also going, hey, don't turn the eye from habitat work to artificial population boosting.
Right.
This is not a healthy conversation for us to have, and no one benefits if that sage grouse gets listed on the endangered species list. It is disastrous if that happens. So the work needs to stay on the ground, on habitat. On point.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of a lazy conservation solution, I say that in air quotes, that's been proposed with this pen raising thing, and it's just not good for the long term of this animal. And we're just asking that we let this bill die. We let the sunset close this down. And here's the really, really important thing is, this farm has gone to a lot of work and a lot of dollars to get the 50 sage grouse or 51 sage grouse that they do have. If we kill this bill, this farm can still exist and keep using those 51 birds under an existing permit. So this isn't going to make them have to go slaughter the birds or do anything with that. It's just saying no more egg collection off the landscape.
Yeah.
No more licensing of new farms. This is an idea that we are not behind as a state, and it's sort of against the Wyoming values that we have.
Yeah, and I should almost say we shouldn't say Wyoming values, but I mean it's happening in your backyard, so for sure. But yeah, it sounds, and it's kind of good to hear if they've got it this far, this person who's this group who's put that work into, and maybe in 10 years they figured something out, and if they could show it to the scientists and they could show it to the world, like Thomas Edison, it took him 900 tries to make a light bulb, right? So let them work, let them do their 900 tries, but in the meantime, let's not turn the boat around on habitat and what really needs to happen. What's it like? What does it entail with extraction, ranching, and government? I mean, there's an active board, so to speak, working on this in the right direction all the time, right? The state.
Oh yeah, there's the sage grouse implementation team that's put together, and I actually think it has multiple states that are part of it. In fact, I have a colleague that sits on it, but it's sort of like the guiding advisory board, so to speak, on sage grouse and the sage grouse management plans. We've had 2 executive orders come through, one proposed by Matt Mead, who you met, former Governor Matt Mead, and then adopted and slightly amended, but upheld and valued by Governor Gordon, who's the current governor in Wyoming. And actually, the previous governor to Mead was also deep into the sage grouse work. So it has 3 administrations in the state worth of work sitting on there.
Right.
And ag, industry, I think there's some recreation and tourism. I mean, it's the gambit sits on there, because we all know that sage grouse and healthy populations of that, affects everyone. If there's an endangered species listing, you can just look at what happens with wolves and grizzly bears and
owls and you name it. No, I mean, I took that away when I went out there, that let's say that was, instead of everybody working together, and if they'd have just had a knee-jerk reaction to say it's going to be listed, that would stop ranching in some areas, right? That would stop oil extraction.
Development.
Development.
Yeah.
And but what's neat is the state and the ranchers in the let's just call it oil and gas. I guess that's what maybe it's electricity, maybe it's solar too. I don't know, but you have a really firm way of going about it now when it comes to extraction or use of the land, right? Like you're putting these plans in for 3 administrations to try to do the best for the bird, and this wasn't in the plan. This is kind of like a leash law that's snuck in somewhere, Yep. And you're like, what do you mean I can't walk my dog on a 3-foot leash? What do you mean it's got to be a 2-foot leash? I feel bad that they got this through in the first place, but that happens in the state of Michigan too. We have a terrific state organization called Michigan United Conservation Clubs, and they sit right in Lansing. And people in Michigan, I think a lot of us know, but a lot of us don't even know. Out of all the states in the union, we have the best. They literally sit in Lansing waiting for stuff like this to come through. And they literally run up to the floor and go, whoa, 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 But not every state has that. And
it's just me down here.
Yeah, just Jess down there trying to stop everything. Poor Jess.
At that point in 2007, I mean, there's some conservation groups that are sort of more on the environmental side of things. They do touch on wildlife work and help out when they can, but they're also covering like nuclear, solar, and wind and all that other stuff.
Right.
That's what we don't work on as a federation. As a federation, we work on wildlife and wildlife habitat and work from the hunting voice. And so I was down there and relatively pretty new actually to the lobby work. And then this bill just comes through and just smokes through the whole legislature. And now I've got, my feet under me and know when to reach out for help when I need it.
Yeah.
And so hence calling you and we've worked with Project Upland. My colleague, Anna Kaufman, wrote a really great article for Project Upland that gives a little more history and a little more insight to this. And I realized very quickly, and this is something that I think was another reason to reach out to you, Ronnie, is that this is not just a Wyoming issue. When they failed to pass a sunset extension in 2019, I think, the same sort of group of folks that were pushing for this bill then took the bill to Idaho. And so this idea is not just for the state of Wyoming is struggling with it. It's going to hit Idaho. I wouldn't be surprised if it hit Montana or any of the other states that have sage grouse populations, even if they're minimal ones.
Right.
And so it's turning into something where it's like taking the conservation message, like we keep talking about that habitat message, and pulling that needle over to this sort of, well, maybe we don't have to work quite as much on habitat if we artificially boost the population over here. And it's just not a healthy discussion to go down.
It's not science-based, for sure.
Not science-based,
I mean,
no.
And
all the scientists are pulling their hair out over this right now.
I mean, we're going to keep yakking about it a little bit, but just because I want to say it a couple times, what can listeners do? And I want to do it again when we close out later, but right off the bat, I want to get it right in the middle of this. What can listeners do who are like, no, that's not something I support. It sounds sketchy, whatever it sounds like to them, I want them to do as much as they can and write to who? What's their action?
Yes. So you can go onto Wyoming Wildlife Federation's website, wyomingwildlife.org, and we have an action alert on there that you can take. And what I would encourage you, and we will send it to the right people. So currently this bill is sitting in our Senate. It's probably up for first reading later today, might be tomorrow. And it'll have 3 more readings in the Senate, and then it'll go to the House. So we've caught this relatively early in its movement. So there'll be some time. But a couple of the things when you're filling out action alerts, and this is just sort of like a good thing for everybody to know, don't just send the form letter. The form letter is there to explain to you guys, like, here's the issues with it. Read it, take it, put it in your own words, add a personal touch. If you're like somebody that wants to come hunt sage grouse, or you're a scientist that works in this, sector, or whatever it is, put your personal touch and then personalize the subject line as well, because we want these people to understand that folks aren't just hitting send in a form letter. Folks are taking the time to say that, no, this really is a bad idea. We really do care. And we want this, bill to die. Always, always, always. And this is the triple underline, be respectful. These people are down here working sometimes 16-hour days. And I know that because I'm working next to them. And it's long days, and they're not there because they don't care, but they may not understand. So this is a citizen legislature. They need to hear from people that really care about what's going on here.
They don't need to hear somebody get nasty. They just need to hear your story. Like, I've been there. I'm going back. I've been going there for years. My dream is to be there. Whatever it is, put a personal touch to it, but keep it civil, obviously.
Yes, because the uncivil stuff, it doesn't help our cause.
No, it never does. never, ever does. What's backing up to? What does the program look like now that's working with extraction and ranching? How big is that? What does that look like on a state level, where the government and Wyoming Wildlife gets together with these entities like this, with ranchers and extraction companies?
Yeah, my colleague Joy is probably going to be a better person to speak to the nuances of how the CIGIT works and the sage grouse plan. While I'm the point of the spear as the government affairs director, she is actually our policy person, so she'll know the ins and outs. But functionally, they meet a couple of times a year and they talk about where this is going, what are bumps in the road that we've hit, where are some things where we need to tweak it, how does this management plan fall under like the governor's executive order that he has, and then where are we looking for the future of sage grouse. We have adjusted because we've kept hunting them, and that's been a really important thing to keep advocates on the ground for this bird, because hunting is looked at as a de minimis practice. It's different from this egg collections. The egg collection is happening during a really vulnerable time. It's happening during a nesting time. It's happening not during the fall where you have fully grown birds on the ground that are less prone to disturbance and everything else. And you look at hunting as this de minimis practice, but we've adjusted our seasons, we've shortened our seasons, and we've taken back our take to fit in with this management plan as these populations fluctuate and as we keep working with habitat. And I think the main goal of this is just habitat.
Yeah.
Wherever we can, we're trying to pull together, working with everyone to make sure that these birds have a place to go.
Right. And it's not, obviously, it's just not about, I mean, this happens to be, this bill is about sage grouse rearing, but people have to keep in mind that habitat, and I know this has probably been pounded to people, there's a whole lot more out there. If we think that this rearing program is a great idea, and we take our eye off that habitat prize for a moment or a week or a year, that's where things just slide down. And whether you're a mule deer hunter or whatever you're doing out there, it does have a snowfall or a snowball effect. So
absolutely, and it's scary precedent. Yeah.
I cannot. It's hard to believe that out of all the places I've been and all the things I've done, and people I've talked to, that somebody's like. It's hard to believe that like state legislatures, that in a state like Wyoming, we always think there's like 8 of you out there, right? 8 or 9 people out there in Wyoming. And well, now that Weatherby moved in, you got another 80. But other than that, that you would think that everybody would be on board, like right off the bat. And how do you get that word out? I mean, it seems like you're trying to build a pyramid with the old rollers,
Yeah, I think really what it is that this bill is really hard to message because it's being touted as a conservation strategy. And so it got messaged right out of the gate as that. And, tracking a 4-week budget session in Wyoming, there's 300 bills going through in 4 weeks, sometimes more than that. And then we have budgets with 75 amendments on them, and everybody's trying to track everything. And everybody's getting hit with like, we're working on Medicaid, or we're working on a budget amendment over here, or we're doing this. And, they're working on critical race theory right now. So there's really there's so much going on. And so, when you look at something, you just glass over and you're like, oh, sage grouse conservation strategy, farming. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
You see the word conservation attached to a sentence, or you're like, oh, good. Something's happening over there. Uh-oh, I lost my feed. Do you hear me? What happened here?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I had a little fupa there. I don't know what it was. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay. All right. So again, people they can go online, go to Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and there's a call to action on there.
Yeah, and it'll be wyomingwildlife.org.
.org. And then it's easy to navigate, right? Nothing tough. And then write yourself a personal note to wherever that link takes you to. And you don't have to be a resident. I want to be clear, like I know we said that, but you don't have to be a resident of the state to be involved, to let them know, because everybody knows the western states bring in a lot of hunters.
Wyoming hosts the largest population of sage grouse in the world. We have 48% of the population of sage grouse that exist.
Right.
And it's, that while it is a species managed by the state and a lot of the work has been carried by the state, I think all of us that are part of this understand that this resource is cared about outside of state lines.
Yeah.
And I would say that if you are a non-resident writing in, please make that evident in the sense of like, I come to Wyoming to hunt sage grouse.
Right.
Like, I bring tourism dollars here. I bring my family here. I make memories here. And while I may not be a resident of the state,
Right.
I bring you state value when I come in.
Yeah.
And I care about what this resource is and for the longevity of it. And if you are a resident of Wyoming, please find out which senator and which representative is yours and specifically reach out to them and let them know and start building that personal relationship with them, because they benefit from that as well.
And we can't dilly and we can't dally. We got to get this going. Like
sooner rather than later.
I mean, like this week, like let's whatever we can do. I would say too, there's no reason not to reach out to a few of the other podcasters out there and do, just drown them with this. Drown the listeners with this. This is not. We're not trying to. This isn't like prohibition, back in the 20s, right? This is a good thing to get involved with. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think this is something that, you can be a part of dictating a good future for sage grouse. If you can weigh in on this and always, again, I'll follow that up with be respectful, be passionate, and be very, very authentic in how you reach out.
Yeah. Did you get to do a little swinging the shotgun this year, or are you just too busy being the director these days? Does the director still get to hunt?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think the plus side of working for an NGO is they don't pay me enough to yell at me when I take a lot of time off.
Oh, good.
No, but they also, we always take a good portion of September. We get hunting time off specifically in our jobs because it's really important that we as a sporting organization is authentic in how we present ourselves.
Right.
I actually got as a Christmas present the first shotgun that I've ever actually owned.
Nice.
And got to go out and I went pheasant hunting with my dad and a couple of his crew, and they always do sort of what they call a pheasant tournament, and I won it with the longest tail this year. I was the first woman in 30 years to win it, and it's also the first pheasant I've ever shot on the wing, so
really?
It worked out really well. Yep.
It didn't have like a white ribbon tied to it, though, did it? No. Okay, good.
No, these are actually where we pheasant hunt is up out of Cody, and it's one of the few places in the state where you're pheasant hunting with bear spray because you're just as likely to find a grizzly bear as you are a pheasant.
Come on. All right, maybe I shouldn't put this episode out there because I know I've been in some spots where there's bears, and I will tell you, I don't know how you must love it more than I do because as much as I want the birds to be there forever and for my grandkids, I may not go there because where I was, I'm going to say, that was down by south.
You're down south a little bit.
Yeah, down south. You're up there in grizzly bear country. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. Really nice. You
get a whole scenic safari and a bird hunt.
Oh, my God. What does your dad have for dogs?
My dad has a little Labrador. My dad actually spent time in college and out of college as working with a professional trainer in New York and field trialing Labradors. So we have always had little small built Labradors that have a really nice brain. And this little dog that he has now, we didn't take her because she just turned 17 years old. Oh,
of course. I hope not.
She still goes out, and we'll take her out on like a little rabbit hunt or like, a 20-minute walk around somewhere so she can stick her nose in and, blow out a pheasant or something like that. But, she's pretty deaf and she sort of aimlessly wanders now. But I think my dad's starting to look for another hunting dog. So we'll see where he ends up with that.
And then you mentioned to me, you're looking for a hunting dog.
I really, the more that I've read and the more that I've spent time with them, I really, really like the Boykin. Mm-hmm. And I have a family member and a very good friend that both have one. And while they both have, one as a female, one as a male, I think I want a female Boykin at some point. And I just got to get to the point where I have the time to do her justice.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be, I want to know when you get that little Boykin.
I will. You'll be the first phone call when I'm like, Ronnie, what am I doing?
Right. I'll come out there for a little week and give you a crash course or something if you get her the right time of the year.
Oh, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
I know you're very busy in your position. Was last season good, bad, or indifferent with sage grouse?
They were down last season. Their population was down. We are still struggling to get, I think, accurate counts of populations. And there's some kinks to work out, I think, in that, because right now they just use from wing data, and it's hard to know how many people actually put the wings in the barrels versus don't.
Right.
And so there is, it is down, and they've adjusted hunting seasons because of it. There's been some speculation and some attention put on that by the CIGIT, but they are holding the hunting as part of that. And we keep reiterating, at least as Wyoming Wildlife Federation, that it's so important that we allow for the hunting of these as a de minimis practice, because it builds the advocate. Because if the sage grouse loses the hunter, they're not left with many people willing to stand up and fight for them.
Right. Well, I mean, most people will never see one.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember a takeaway I got from something. Again, I'm not a big game hunter. And I can't remember whose podcast it was. They were talking about the North American Sheep Foundation. I don't know what the acronym is.
Yeah.
And it's funny that they could get so many people invested in trying to work with the sheep population in North America, yet almost nobody that's doing the work is ever even going to have a chance to hunt them. But they're keeping it to where somebody can.
Yep.
And
it's amazing.
People from all over the country, let alone putting in for a tag, but some of them, they know right well. They know they'll outlive the possibility of ever being able to help with sheep hunting. And we don't think of it sometimes with birds, but it's the same situation. To keep that bird a viable bird on a landscape for hunters means that we're paying enough attention to the habitat and to the bird to keep that alive, even if you never. So again, for people who are listening, I know my listeners are all over the country. I mean, I've got listeners all over the world. At least that's what the RSS feed tells me. It shows me a little map of, I think I got one Russian listener and about 80 in Spain and about 400 in Germany. And but anybody and everybody, if they care about what they do, really, it'd be embarrassing that you couldn't take 5 or 10 minutes to go do this.
Yep.
'Cause this isn't like a controversial bill. Like, well, no, I've got research that says it works. This is something we can all stand up for, whether you're going to hunt them or whether you think you're going to hunt them or whether you hunt them currently.
The leading scientists on this bird are saying that captive rearing is not where conservation comes from for them. It is with habitat.
Right.
And all this game farm is going to do is open the sage grouse up to a litany of risks that are adding to the ones they already have to deal with.
Right.
And so it should be a non-starter, but it's a fight we're currently in.
Well, I mean, I just want to pound that across to people that we really, really, really need your participation. And if enough people write, I probably never thought this. And it's kind of really exciting for someone as old as me to see someone as young as you. It seemed like even when I was young, all the people that were the advocates and the directors were all old. And now we got a bunch of these old hunters and a bunch of young people, at the wheel for us. And you've got a lot vested in it and invested in it, I would just be embarrassed if people couldn't take the time to do what we're asking them to do, because it's not just going to help the sage grouse in Wyoming. It could help the sage grouse in other places, but it could help stop things like this in other states with other wildlife programs too.
If we manage to shut this down, it sort of says that, listen, this is not the conservation strategy. We, good, bad, or worse, Wyoming is the leading voice in sage grouse conservation because we have the population here. And, if we allow this bill through, it's going to set the wrong message for the rest of the conservation strategies out there. And so this is a national issue. And
it really
I think
is.
Sometimes the lawmakers here, I think as well-intentioned as they are, don't realize that, at least on the scale of conservation-wise, that Wyoming really is a leader in that. And so, again, when you reach out, and I'm saying when, not if, when you reach out.
Right, whether it's today, this afternoon, or tonight, that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. just send a note that's respectful, that's heartfelt. You are talking to real people with a lot on their plate right now. But just urge them to vote no. It's on Senate File 61 is the number, and it's got a really long, convoluted name. I think it's Sage Grouse Game Bird Farms, no certification expiration 2.
Okay, but you'll be able to find that on WyomingWildlife.org, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, do you want to beat anybody else up here for a while, or do you think we got our point across, Jess?
I think we beat that dead horse,
Okay.
and I think we've got our point across.
Well, I will put this podcast out tonight when I get done I'll start loading it up and make sure it sounds good. And I'll do anything else I can if there's anybody else you want that I know that you don't have numbers of. There's several other podcasters out there. It may sound like, well, Jess is just on another podcast doing it, but, not all bird hunters listen to all podcasts, And I think even Instagram, if there's something if you could send me to Instagram, even if it's I'm sure WyomingWildlife.org has an Instagram.
We have an action alert actually on Instagram
Okay.
and on Facebook that I can share with you, and
Good.
I can share the alert for show notes if you have that, and I'm happy to put that out. And I would take any and all contacts on this. I think we're at the point where this bill went through introduction. Out of 30 votes, only 2 were a no vote. So we're up against significant pressure.
We got to let them know that as important as whatever else they were working on there at the Capitol, this is important to us.
Yep, exactly.
And they're going to have to kind of set back and go, "Ooh, sorry, I just saw the word conservation. I'm sorry, I thought I was doing a good thing." And
exactly.
you said it. You said it. I think you said it really clear. These people are working on a whole. They got so much time to do it, and it's sad that we don't have the resources to just get this out year long and where everybody could be educated. But there isn't a time for that. But there's enough time to send this letter.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, Jess, I'll do what I can. I'm gonna hit the pause button here, and I'm gonna talk to you for a little bit, and I'll get some show notes and some links and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, hold tight. Okay, so you got the action alert. I want you to go to Wyoming Wildlife on Instagram, hit the like button. It's 2 days ago they just put this out, and it's all about the continuation of the greater sage grouse farming in Wyoming that continues to shoot holes in the bottom of the boat. That is the greater sage grouse conservation. So let's do what we can. Help Jess out, help Wyoming out, help yourself out, okay? This is an issue bigger than all of us, and we need to do this. I beg you to just get there, go to WyomingWildlife.org, take the action alert, write them an email, go to Instagram, share their Instagram. I'll share the Instagram on mine, share it on yours. Let's show everybody that we do have a way to do this, okay? We have a voice, and it can be a unified voice from hunters all over the country and all over the globe. Thanks. Have a good week. New podcast will be coming up Sunday. It'll be a doozy.